Zuko's firebending was always worse than Azula's. I mean, she was able to bend blue fire, one of the hottest types of flame available in the Avatar universe, while he was stuck with the basic orange flame. This has always been a point of insecurity for Zuko even after he took the Fire Nation throne after the defeat of his father. However, there's a panel in the Avatar comics where Zuko does something that he's never done before in the entire animated series, not even once. He is able to summon a core of fire that isn't just orange, it isn't red, and it isn't Azula's signature blue, but it is something else entirely different, something that it looks like it belongs to the dragons themselves. So hit that subscribe button, and today we're going to dive deep into the story of the moment that Zuko finally learned how to bend iridescent flames like the Dragon Masters. So to understand why this moment hit so hard, we need to take a quick look at a bit of backstory for Zuko in the comics, something that not many people have actually read. So in case you don't know, when Zuko was still finding his footing with Team Avatar, his firebending mysteriously dried up on him. Toph pointed out that if she learned earthbending from the Badger Moles, maybe Zuko, in order to start firebending again and being able to bend his flames, he needed to look back to the original source of fire too, which turned out to be the dragons. He and Aang tracked down two ancient dragons named Ran and Shor, the last of their kind, and the creatures that surrounded the two in a spiraling iridescent fire that shifted through every color imaginable. In that moment, Zuko understood that firebending was never supposed to come from rage. It was supposed to come from energy and purpose, and from the sun. He walked away from that mountain after being shown this new knowledge from the firebending masters, and he knew deep inside that he had much to learn about the firebending arts. And that's where the comics pick things up years later, with Zuko now sitting on the throne as Fire Lord. He's just brought home his mother for the first time since his childhood, along with his stepfather and his little new sister, Ki, hoping for something close to a fresh start. But while he's been away searching for his mum, a resistance group calling itself the New Ozai Society has been organizing in secret, convinced that Zuko is too weak to rule, and they are determined to put his father back on the throne. Their leader, a bitter former governor named Ukano, has been planning an ambush for the exact day that Zuko is set to bring his family back to the capital, timing it for a stretch of road where the caravan will be exposed and vulnerable. Zuko gets a warning about the plot, however, just before it happens, so he arranges a decoy, sending his uncle Iroh riding through the main road in his place, while Zuko and his family slip towards the palace along a hidden route with an escort from the Kyoshi warriors. For a while, it actually works. Iroh's decoy is absolutely beastly. His carriage does get ambushed by a handful of New Ozai Society members, but they're all taken down almost embarrassingly fast, and Iroh is an absolute beast, which should have been the first clue that something bigger was happening elsewhere. But sure enough, back on the real route, a tree crashes down in front of Zuko's caravan, and explosives go off, and dozens of Society fighters swarm out from behind a wall of felled trees, chanting for the return of Ozai. What follows is a chaotic, sprawling fight. Zuko himself throws into it immediately, trying to keep the attackers away from the carriage where his mother, stepfather, and little sister are hiding. One of Ukano's own men, a young guy named Ki Lo, who secretly has fallen for Mei and has been feeding her information, ends up turning on the Society mid-battle and cutting Zuko free after he gets caught by a weighted cable. As you can imagine, Zuko has very mixed feelings about this guy because he's now with Mei, but Zuko still loves Mei even though they've broken up at this point in the timeline. Mei and Ty Lee then drop in from a Kyoshi warrior airship to help even the odds, and Iroh, being the absolute monster he is, in a great way, and having ditched the decoy role, completely joins the fight. For a moment, it actually looks like Zuko might have things under control, but then Ukano's men manage to corner him without a backup, and a whole cluster of firebenders closing in with nobody around to help. One of them sneers something about how fitting it is that the Fire Lord will meet his end in the same fire he claims to command, and the group unloads on him all at once. A massive burst of flames swallows Zuko completely, and for one gut-wrenching second, everyone watching, allies and attackers alike, assume that that's exactly what just happened, that Zuko just died. But the fire doesn't behave the way it's supposed to. Instead of dying down into smoke, it pulls together into a spinning column, and the color shifts right in front of everyone's eyes, yellows and reds bleeding into greens and deep purples and even blues, the exact same impossible palette that the dragon summoned on that mountain years earlier. The men who just tried to kill him stand there frozen and completely unable to process what they are looking at. When the flames finally settle, Zuko is standing on top of the carriage completely unharmed, arms raised from the motion that shaped it, and the same men who were laughing seconds earlier are now scrambling to get away from him. This is the payoff that the Firebending Masters had been building towards the entire time. And this ambush is a direct callback to the fire that the dragons wrapped around him back on that mountain all that time ago. Except this time, it isn't happening during some spiritual awakening in a hidden temple. It's happening in the middle of a real deadly fight, showing just how practical the knowledge that the dragons taught Zuko and Aang actually was. The techniques that they taught him have now actually become a part of how he fights when it actually counts. Everything Ran and Shaw taught him about drawing fire from purpose instead of fury, about firebending being connected to energy and the self rather than rage and destruction, gets proven true in the worst possible circumstances, against men who wanted him dead simply for trying to lead differently than his father did. What makes this scene hit even harder though is what it says about who Zuko has become by this point in the story, just a little bit of time a few years after the original show. He's no longer drawing on his hatred for the new Ozai society, and he isn't fighting out of vengeance for what they tried to do to his family. He's defending the people he loves, using a form of firebending built entirely around protection and balance rather than domination, and the fire itself seems to reflect exactly that shift. The men who attack him are still operating under the old Fire Nation mindset, the one built on fear and superiority that Sozin's generation used to justify wiping out the dragons in the first place. Watching that same old philosophy completely overwhelmed by the very fire that it once tried to erase is certainly not a coincidence, and it's really the story telling us that this is the new order now. The people who are doing things righteously and through justice are winning. But the fight doesn't end there, and Zuko still has a much bigger, stranger threat waiting for him, involving the real identity behind the Kage. But that's a story for a separate time. What matters here is the one specific moment on the road to the capital, where a group of assassins thought they just burned the Fire Lord, but instead get a first-hand look at exactly what he has become during his time with the last two dragons. So if you want to see what happened to Azula and who the Kage are led by, check out the link on screen now in the comments down below or on the end screen. So with that said, are there any other moments in the franchise where someone uses iridescent flames like Zuko does here? Well, the answer is yes. And that person is Roku, and his version might be the most unusual one in the entire franchise, because his comes from rage rather than balance. That might sound crazy, but let me explain. So Roku unleashes his iridescent blast while trying to protect Sozin from a fatal attack, and in that instant, years of restraint just give out. He stops trying to hold back and lets pure fury drive his instinct. And what comes out of his palm is the same shimmering, otherworldly color, strong enough to level an entire cave system, the iridescent flame. On paper, that should completely contradict everything that the dragons taught Zuko, since Ran and Shaw made it clear that real firebending is supposed to come from purpose and energy, not anger. But Roku's rage in that moment isn't selfish. He's not lashing out because he's been humiliated or because someone challenged his pride, the way Zuko used to fight back when he was younger. He's trying to save the person he loves the most in the world, and that distinction really does matter. Intention matters. And this actually tracks with something that firebending has hinted at across the franchise for a very long time, that fire itself is morally neutral and just responds to the intensity and clarity of what is driving it. It's actually got a strong parallel outside of Avatar too. In Star Wars, the Sith use Sith lightning. Everyone recognizes that this is a dark side ability, but the Jedi also have something called electric judgment. And this is exactly the same as Sith lightning, but it's yellow, and it can only be used when you have a clear and pure heart. So the intention of a user when using an ability actually really does matter in many universes, and it seems to be the same in Avatar. And that really is the through line connecting Zuko and Roku here. Even when their fire comes from what looks like opposite emotional places on the surface, Zuko's iridescent flame comes from letting go of anger entirely, while Roku's comes from anger with a clean, selfless purpose behind it. Either way, the color seems to show up right on the edge of what firebending is supposed to be capable of, basically when the person who is channeling it is fighting for something bigger than their own ego. And we can see that here with Zuko as well, protecting the ones he loves. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this comic from the Avatar universe. If you want to see more Avatar lore and comics just like this, hit that subscribe button, leave a like down below, and if you made it this far, as always, drop a thank Mr. Zuko in the comments down below.